Hey everyone, welcome back for another video. If you're new here, my name is Tonya and thank you so much for stopping by to hang out with me today. In today's video, we're going to be talking about all the different books that I read in the month of May. I read a total of 8 books, 2 of which were audiobooks, 6 that were physical or ebooks, and in addition to that, I did have one DNF sadly. And I am not a big DNFer, but it did happen in May. So go ahead, grab yourself a drink. I have mine right here. I have a strawberries and cream Dr. Pepper, which Dr. Pepper is one of my favorite drinks ever. So that is what I have today. But grab yourself a tasty beverage, sit back, relax, and let's chat about some books. All right, so first up, just a little bit of housekeeping. As I said, I read 2 audiobooks in the month of May, and that was a total of 30 hours and 41 minutes of listening time. Both of the 2 audiobooks were 4-star reads, and they were from the same series as well. As far as the physical books and ebook, I read 3,137 pages. I had 1 3.5 star, 1 4 star, 1 4.5 star, and 3 4.5 stars. So that's kind of stat-wise where I ended up for the month of May. So on to the books that I actually read. All right, so let's start off with the audiobooks. As I had mentioned, I read 2 audiobooks and they were both from the Crowns of Nyaxia series, so I'm going to talk about those together. And those books were The Songbird and The Heart of Stone, and The Fallen and The Kiss of Dusk, both by Carissa Broadbent. And these books feature Misha and Asar. And Misha we met in the first 2 books of the Crowns of Nyaxia series. And Asar, he is one of the Shadowborn, and he is kind of an exiled prince. He's a bastard. He's never been on the good side of his father or the crown. So he's kind of lived out on his own and been exiled for quite some time now. But Misha ends up getting captured when she is in the Shadowborn territory, and she gets taken in front of the king as a birthday present by the princess of the Shadowborn. And Asar ends up stopping her execution because he thinks that he has a better use from her than her being killed. And they go off into the underworld on this quest to find 5 certain items because Asar has been given a task by Nyaxia that he needs to complete. So, things kind of develop from there, and, they end up becoming involved with each other. And that's really the basis of what happens in the 3rd book. I'm not really going to go into the 4th book into the series very much, except for that it's a continuation of Misha and Asar's story from the 3rd book, because I don't want to spoil anything for you all. And both of these books were 4 stars for me. That is slightly lower than what I gave the first 2 books that were Rain and Araya, but still really good. I know some people aren't big fans of this second duology in the series, but I still thought it was really good. If you are someone who loves vampires and you love a complex world and strong female main characters, then I think you'll like this story. It was very slow burn, so that's also, if you're someone who likes slow burn, this would be a good series for you too. But yeah, overall, really enjoyed these 2 books, and I'll be continuing on with the 5th and 6th books once those become available. Then next up, I read Half City by Kate Golden, and this was just a good time. If you are someone who likes some of the CW shows back in the day, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Charmed, then you're really going to enjoy this book. It definitely had that kind of 90s, 2000s CW feel. And as I like to call it, the monster of the week, you have to hunt down whatever the deviant or monster is for that week so you can save the world. That's what this had a feel of. And I really enjoyed it. Viv, our female main character, she was really strong. She is a demon hunter, and she had learned to fight demons with her father at a very young age. and he ended up getting killed, and Viv witnessed his murder. And so she's been carrying on, trying to keep up the good fight of, taking care of the people of Half City by keeping all the deviants in check. And deviants run anywhere from werewolves to vampires to demons. Demons are kind of at the top of the food chain, but there's a few different kinds of deviants that are actually out there. And Viv's felt really alone. She was under the impression that her father and her were probably the only demon hunters out there. But then she learns that is not true. She gets approached by an individual named Reed, and he tells her that there's this magical hunter school. There's a magical school called Harker that is set up to help train hunters on how to take down these deviants, be as safe as possible. It's a place where hunters can go and kind of hone these skills. So, as I said, Viv thought she was alone. She didn't know there was any other hunters out there, and she ends up going to this school to try to learn what she can about being a demon hunter, and then she realizes the school is also tied to her father's murder. So, at that point, when she comes to that realization, she knows she's definitely going to go and attend this school. And what was great about this book, besides the whole kill the monster of the week feel, is that there was such great found family right from the beginning of the book. Viv had, as I mentioned, been alone and hunting on her own for quite some time. And when she goes to this school, she's actually welcomed in, which was kind of refreshing because, as you know, a lot of the time in these dark academia type settings, the main character, when they go to the school, everyone hates them. They're on the out and out. But that wasn't the case with this book. She got a really great core group of friends pretty quickly, and I loved all of them. It really brought the feeling of found family, community, all the good feels into this book. So definitely enjoyed it. As I said, it was a 4.25 for me, and I will be continuing on with the series. Then next up, I read Lady Tremaine by Rachel Hockhauser, and this one was a 4-star for me. And I will say, you gotta kind of go on a journey with this book. When we were up to the last 100 pages of the book, I was thinking, it's probably gonna be like a 3-star. But then lots of things went down in that last 100 pages, and it did end up bringing it up to a 4-star for me. And this book is a Cinderella retelling with a little bit of a twist. In this book, the stepmother is kind of the good one, and Cinderella is the bad one. And when I say bad, she's not really bad, but she's the one that's kind of shirking the work and not helping out around the house and those sorts of things that from the traditional Cinderella was the stepsisters. So definitely an interesting twist on it. And I will say this was very character driven for the first couple of 100 pages. There wasn't a lot of action going on. It is past and present timeline, so we did keep jumping back to Lady Tremaine's past and kind of learning some things about herself and how she got to where she is. And Lady Tremaine, even though she is technically, the good one looking out for her daughters and her family in this book, she wasn't perfect by any means. She was, kind of going about trying to force her daughters into society norms, maybe not letting them do that they wanted to do because she wanted to make sure they got a good match as far as marriage was concerned and that they were taken care of and didn't have to struggle the way they currently were. Their financial situation in this book is not great at all. Lady Tremaine's husband had passed away and left them with a lot of debt, and they're trying to keep up the pretense of being wealthy, but the manor they're living in is literally falling apart. And Ellen, who is kind of the Cinderella character in this story, is the stepdaughter, and she doesn't help out with any of the chores or anything like that. And it's not necessarily because she's trying to be snotty or mean or whatever, but her mom died when she was pretty young, and her mother was big on etiquette and had this book that she went by, and Elaine's trying to follow this etiquette book about how ladies should act to a T, and part of that is basically acting as if. So if you do want to be this perfect lady, you shouldn't be doing like mundane chores or anything like that. So since she's so caught up in trying to be this perfect highborn lady, then, she kind of shirks some of the duties she should really be doing to help out around the house. So like I said, definitely an interesting twist on the story, but it did take me quite some time to get into it. If the last 100 pages or so hadn't picked up so much in the plot, then I probably would have stayed at a 3-star or even been maybe a little bit lower. But things really ramp up around those last 100 pages, and it really did change how I felt about the story. So if you do go into this one and you're feeling like it's a little slow, just know you got to give it some time and get like 3/4 of the way through the book before the action actually starts to take place. Then next up, I read The Hemlock Queen by Hannah Whitten, and this is the second book in the Nightshade Crown, and this one was a 4.5 for me. I have absolutely been loving this series. It's very dark, it's gothic, very atmospheric, and it has a love triangle of all love triangles in it. In the first book with the love triangle, like, pretty much no action happened. I think there was some kissing, but that was about it. This book, you get pretty far into it before you have any sort of spice. And it's the love triangle isn't anything what you would think. And this love triangle isn't just a lot of people running around trying to have sex with each other. It's definitely more on an emotional level and on a spiritual level, I would say. So very interesting. So very, very different kind of love triangle. If you're someone who doesn't usually like that trope, don't let that scare you away from the series, because it really is done super well and in a unique manner. And since this is the second book in the series, there's not a lot I can tell you, but I will say if you do like those dark atmospheric kind of reads and like hearing about forbidden love and power and religion and vengeful gods, then this will be a really good series for you. What I can say, just based off of the first book, to not give anything away, is we're following 3 individuals. Lore is our female main character, and she is something called a death witch, and her magic is centered around death. Then we have Bastion, who is a prince of the realm, and his line is supposed to have someone who has life magic, though no one's had it yet. So people are still waiting around for this chosen one to have life magic from his father's line. And then there's Gabe, who is a priest, and the priest also have death magic, but they only get death magic by being close to death. So they have some sort of near-death experience, and then if they do happen to survive, they end up having this death magic and end up going into the priesthood. So I love how unique the magic system is, and it is a very well developed world, and the characters are really the best part. There's great tension in between Lore, Bastion, and Gabe. All 3 of them have this sort of tension about them. They all care for each other, and it's just been such a fun series to read, and I am a sucker for all those gothic dark vibes, so this one has been right up my alley. I definitely will be reading the 3rd book in the series sometime soon. So yeah, if you're a fan of romantasy and you also like those dark gothic vibes like One Dark Window or Belladonna, then definitely give this series a try. Then sadly, next was my DNF, and that was Catabasis by R.F. Kuang. And I really enjoyed the writing in this book. It was no issue with that. And overall, the story as a whole was interesting. But where it kind of went south for me is we're following these 2 individuals who have went to hell to try to find their professor because they need a recommendation letter for him. So that part was all fine. Being in hell, I really enjoyed how that was described and kind of laid out. But we were spending a whole lot of time in flashbacks of one of the characters and about, kind of her relationship with this professor. And those got to be a bit repetitive, a bit tiresome. I mean, basically what it boiled down to is the professor was a narcissist and he wasn't very nice to his students, but Alice, who is the female main character in this book, she can't seem to realize that he was such an asshole because he was brilliant and had, done all these great things in the magical field. But we spent so much time there and so little time like actually traveling through hell and learning about her relationship with Peter, who was the other student in hell, that I just lost interest. I got about 225 pages into the book, and that's where I kind of called it quits. So I'll definitely give R.F. Kuang's writing another chance, but this particular story just wasn't for me. Then I picked up A House of Flame and Shadow, which is the third book in the Crescent City series, and this one was a 4.5 for me. I absolutely loved it. I devoured this book, even though she is quite the chunky book. I just really enjoyed how the story was told and how things kind of wrapped up in this third book. Now, I know this book is not everyone's favorite, and I can see where there are some parts of it where maybe the storyline could have went a different direction, but I still loved it. I was so invested in Bryce and Hunt and Rune's stories before we even got to this third book that I just wanted to know more, and I wanted to know how things ended. And I'm not the hugest fan of urban fantasy, but I really did love all of the storytelling in this world. It's a very complex world, lots of different races within this world. I mean, you have everything from fae to wolf shifters to mer people to fire sprites. Like, it runs the whole gambit. And each race is just thought out so well that it just added so many layers to the stories. So I would recommend this whole series. The books are long, but they're definitely worth it. The only reason this wasn't a 5-star for me is I felt like things wrapped up a little too tidy at the end. I like there to be a little bit of a mess when we get to the ending, and I feel like things lined up a little too perfectly for what I like to see in an ending and, what's really realistic. And when I say realistic, it's a fantasy book. I get that it's not realistic, but I think you all know what I mean. So yeah, I loved it. 4.5 stars, and was so happy that I finally got around to reading this one. Then I read The Ballad of Fallen Dragons by Sarah Parker, and this one broke me in the best way possible. This was one of my most anticipated releases for this year. I landed at a 4.5, but I'm still kind of going back and forth. I may bump it up to a 5, but we shall see. This is the sequel to the book When the Moon Hatched. So of course, I can't go into a lot of details about this specific book, but what I can tell you is the writing is so lyrical in it. The world is very, very detailed and unique. The magic in this particular world is elemental, but it's kind of elemental and divine at the same time because the gods are elements and you speak to the gods, and then they're the ones that kind of do the magical work for you. So very unique magic system. There are, of course, as you may be able to tell, dragons in this series. And there's a really kind of poetic, tragic part of dragons being in this world where when it's their time to pass on, they fly up into the sky and fossilize and become moons around this particular planet. So very tragic and poetic all at the same time. And this series is just everything to me. There are a lot of characters. Like I said, it is a pretty complex world. But if you kind of just let it go and flow with it, I think you'll really enjoy this book. The romance in this book is top notch, and Rave, our female main character, just has so many different layers to her. Now, some people, Rave is not their favorite. She can be a little bit much in certain aspects, but once you learn her story and all the various different things that have happened to her in her life, then you get a real understanding of why Rave does act the way she does. And then on top of that, you just have the amazing chemistry in between Khan and Rave. And in this book also, there's a ton of found family. I just love everything about this series. Even when I was crying, I still loved it. And you may be saying, well, then that definitely sounds like a 5-star. And that is kind of why I'm leaning more towards maybe bumping up my rating. Why I didn't immediately give it a 5-star is the ending of this book. It's great, but there's some details that I wanted that we didn't get. We'll probably get those details in the third book, but I felt like they had a place in this book. So that's really the only reason that I bumped it down a little bit. But as I said, I am leaning more towards going with a 5-star just because I love this series so much and how it is able to convey so many emotions and make me feel so many things that it probably really deserves to be a 5-star read. Then the last book I read this month was A Kiss of Crimson Ash by Anuja Vargas, and this was her debut work. I was kindly sent this book by Orbit and Hatchet Group, which I am so thankful for and so glad that I get to share my thoughts with you on this book. This book was kind of a new background for me. It is based on South Asian mythology and medieval India, and those aren't cultural things that I have a lot of experience with, and I definitely haven't read that many books about it. So I really enjoyed those different cultural aspects of it. I will also say this is a very queer norm, LGBTQ friendly book. There's lots of different relationships within this book. There's FF, there's MM, there's FM. So it kind of runs the gambit and is presented in a way where it's more of a society norm. So I really enjoyed that in this book. It is also very diverse. The majority of the characters are men and women of color. So that is not something you always see in fantasy books. So I really did also enjoy the diversity and the inclusion that this book promoted. Overall, I really enjoyed the series. I did land at a 3.75, which I think is great for a debut author. And in this book, we're following 3 different individuals as the main characters. We're following Tara, who has just become queen, Garjan, who is a prince of a neighboring realm who now has married Tara, and Roland, who is a friend of Garjan. And Tara's realm is a matriarchal realm. It's always been ruled by queens. And when the marriage is arranged by Garjan's brother for him to marry Tara, it's done with the fact that he basically wants Garjan to take over Tara's throne so that he can in fact be the one that's ruling the kingdom instead of Tara and Garjan. And from there we find out that there's a bigger conspiracy that is actually going on. Garjan's brother, who is the king of Nandapur, is also working with the emperor to kind of take everything over. They want to have all the power. They want to rule all of the kingdoms kind of under one iron fist. And along with that, they're trying to bring something back called the Great Blast. And that was like a cataclysmic event that happened, thousands of years ago that kind of diminished magic within the realm and also wiped out some races completely. In this book, the magic is done by women and elves. And the elf part did throw me off a little bit because there's not really supposed to be elves in this sort of culture, but it was something the author just kind of added in. But that being said, basically the elves and women are the ones with magic. And the emperor and one group of elves, there's kind of 2 different factions of elves, and one of those groups has aligned with the emperor, and they want to bring about another great blast to kind of reset the world. The emperor will be able to take over and have all this power, and then they feel like things will get back to how they're meant to be. So really interesting plot, and it was quite a fast-paced book. But I believe because it was so fast-paced, it is relatively short. But with it being such a short book, I think that hindered the relationships in the book. They came off as very surface level. There was kind of 3 different main relationships that were happening. And there was only one of the 3 that I felt fully invested in and felt like it had some depth and some meaning and we could actually understand why they cared for each other. The other 2, it was kind of started off as, hey, let's have sex. And then, it started to develop into something further, but I don't feel like we ever really got that true connection. Now, this is the first book in a trilogy, so hopefully as the books go on, those relationships will deepen and we'll get a better feeling and connection with the characters. But that was really my only kind of critique of the book, is those relationships that I felt like were so important in this book. I wanted us to just dive a lot deeper into them. And that is all of the books that I read in the month of May. I felt like overall it was a really good reading month for me. Let me know down in the comments what your favorite book you read in May was, or if you've read any of these books, what your thoughts were on them. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week. Take care, keep reading, and I'll catch you in my next video. Bye.